Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Live. And today, with Brian Johnson, the city manager, we are doing Prime Lunchtime with the city manager. Before we get to Brian, I just want to tell you what the show's about ahead. That we're going to be discussing a little bit about what's gone on during the last week or two. Certainly, the charter amendment, city charter amendment that happened this past city council meeting. Also, want to discuss a little bit the new conference that's going to be held in October. Did you know that vehicles are the most connected devices in the world now, almost overtaking phones? So we're going to have the V2X Live conference here in October, which is about cars and vehicles and the connections they make to everything. So we'll be discussing a bit about that, and we'll also be discussing a little bit about recent development about the hotel development to possible apartments, ordinance changes that happen, and about a company that's looking to target maybe two purchases in the city and possibly taking advantage of that ordinance. Whether or not that happens is a different story, but we'll be discussing a bit about that. And just to let you know, also this weekend, On the Border, the Eagles tribute band is going to be playing Saturday at 7 o'clock. If you haven't gotten your tickets, go to the city website. If it's still available, we are at, I think, the most capacity since COVID started, where the limit is 4,000 at this point. So no circles, 4,000 in that oval area, maybe a little outside of it. We'll get more from Brian on that. But check it out. There might be only a handful of seats left, so you really have to get to it if it's even available at this point. But look out for other concerts later in the summer as well as they come up. So let's bring Brian on. Hey, Brian, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Rico.
Appreciate it. It's always good to be able to talk about the things that's going on in the city and be able to get facts out there and to discuss some of this stuff because I always have 1,000 questions. Sometimes people tell me I have a million questions, but you have to ask those questions to get the answers sometimes, right?
Sure.
Um, so just so then for those that may want to attend the On the Border, so that limit to the concerts now in the town green has been lifted to 4,000, right? And I think we talked about at one point it was 6,000 was the most that it might have held pre-COVID.
That's about right. So, I guess year and a half, 2 years ago, we had a
Yeah,
Queen cover band that there was no limitation. It was first come, first serve, and it certainly spilled out into some of the areas outside of what we consider the developed part of the town green and
right,
kind of into the wood line and things like that. But our cameras counted about 6,000 people.
right,
So
amazing.
that probably is a little bit more than we'd like. The reason that there's a limit on this is not for that reason. It's for COVID. Council had to make a decision about a month out before the event because we've got to be able to. There's some logistics involved in securing the area and
Sure.
how many police officers we need and everything. And so they decided on this event to increase it from, I believe it was 2,500, the concert
The
before
last
this,
time.
I think,
Yep. Yep.
and they increased it to 4,000. And so, other than needing to reserve space to get inside the ropes, if you will, once you're
Hmm.
in there, there are no the city is not regulating your behavior. We're assuming everybody is going to act in a responsible way as it relates to if you're not vaccinated, then, you know, take whatever precautions you need. If you are,
Right.
then, operate what makes you, however you feel comfortable. But
Right.
council will here in about a week and a half will tell me if they want to have a restriction at all on the total numbers for next month's concert, if they just want to lift it and say first come, first serve.
Okay. So first come, first serve, meaning no reservations anymore at
No
that point.
reservations, no roped off area. It's just the
Right.
town green as we normally know it.
Hmm.
And if you want to show up, you know, show up. And if there's a space somewhere, you can set your,
So for
chair
this
up,
con,
your blanket up and do
right.
whatever. Kind of like you remember at the first summer we had.
So I guess if we get to that point, it doesn't matter when people come because people will
Correct.
come sometimes at 2 even
Correct.
for a 7 o'clock concert. But as far as this concert this weekend, will it be roped off like at a particular time, 2 o'clock, or how
I think we're keeping it at 2. That seemed to
two?
work
Okay,
last month. We did a better job of telling the residents when it was going to be roped off. They
right.
also understood the reason why we did it at all, which is
Yeah,
it's easier to keep people from going somewhere to begin with versus to
right.
having to kick them out. And so I
Yeah.
think we'll keep it that way, because if not, I mean, we do have to set up the area at some point. So we would have to, and so that number seemed to be fine.
Good. Great. So that's a cool concert. Everyone should try to get to it. But again, there's limited seats, so if you find it sold out, look at other concerts coming this summer. So you should enjoy that. Town Green's getting a lot more stuff. I mean, there's more shops, I think, that open. Playa Bowl opened not too long ago, a month ago, I think, a month and a half ago. Um, so I don't know what's going on with the old Farm Burger retail there, but things are moving along. There's more coming in, even at the Forum. There's more shops opening over there. So the economy seems to be picking up a little bit. Um, I know that when I went out recently to a couple of restaurants, no masks. It's actually hard to eat with the mask on, but people I think are deciding they can't, it's not even worth bothering to walk in with the mask sometimes because you're just going to take it off when you get to the table. Um, so it's hit or miss when people wear it, right? People are going into retail locations and wearing the masks, but half the people or two-thirds of the people aren't, you know. Um, so, I mean, are you finding anything different going on, economic wise, as far as new? I mean, there's another new restaurant taking over Noblefin. That's Sage Restaurant is coming in. You guys just approved a liquor license for them this last council meeting, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so you said it right. We're seeing indications that things are opening up, that companies and people, entrepreneurs are starting to like make some decisions
Yeah.
and, and sometimes try to capitalize on opportunities. And so we've had some vacant space that the pandemic caused that
Hmm.
have turned around and have somebody, say, hey, maybe now's a good time. So, we're optimistic as some of these things fill in that our local economy will continue to get even stronger than it was. I mean, we've really overall been blessed. Our local economy has stayed pretty strong, and not, there's certainly been some things that have closed that have been disappointing to see,
Yeah.
but overall there's a lot
Oh,
of communities that
yeah.
are a lot worse off than we are.
And there's a lot of jobs still needing employees. I know, every time I go to pass a restaurant, I mean, it almost seems like every other restaurant has a help wanted sign up, from Dunkin' Donuts to Salata to other places. It's like hard to find people willing to work in the retail, in the restaurant business at least. So, they're opening up, but they're also getting crunched as far as whether they have help or not. So there's
That is
definitely that.
true.
Yeah. The other thing is, economically speaking too, I mean, obviously this city has 12 or 13 hotels, including the Hilton, as well as long extended stay hotels and stuff. And the city just passed an ordinance about redeveloping may be possible with criterias and restrictions to hotels converting to apartments. Obviously, hotels are one bedroom, rooms and stuff. There would be tremendous amount of renovation going on, but I think the city limited it to hotels that are either extended stay under 50% occupancy for a period of time, or are changing, lost their brand, like whatever. Like if you're a national chain, but all of a sudden you're not a national chain and you're just a one-off, that there's a possibility for that to happen. So I hear that there's a multi-billion-dollar holding company, real estate holding company that is targeting possible two hotels in the city of Peachtree Corners for possible redevelopment. So I know you may not know which hotels, but so tell us a little bit, just refresh our memory in brief about what could happen, couldn't happen, and just let us know about that.
I mean, she did a pretty good job. I mean, so, the hotel industry in general, I mean, everywhere, got significantly affected by the pandemic.
Mm.
And so, of course, there's been some changes in that industry is still under some duress. But as a result of that, there have been some companies that have decided to take advantage of that, not necessarily advantage, but use this as an opportunity
Mhm.
to potentially create a unique product, and that is to take a hotel that is in some level of duress
Mhm.
and convert it from hotel to apartments. And so this company that you mentioned that's been kicking some tires around Peachtree Corners is doing it in a lot of places. They're doing
Yes,
it
for sure.
wholesale. A lot of different municipalities are having the same thing. Now, in our particular case, when it comes to hotels, we might be especially ripe, if you will, for there to be opportunities because of two reasons. One, we started, pre-pandemic, we have a significant amount of hotels, a lot more than people realize in the city. And so there's a lot of hotels to look at. The second thing is our hotel industry tends to be very business traveler centric.
Yep.
And so, of all the people going into hotels, the ones that are going back right now are not really the business traveler, it's the vacationer. And
Right.
so if there was a type of a hotel that or a group that a hotel caters to, the ones that cater to the business travel might be a little bit even more under stress than the vacation right now.
Mhm.
So that's why we think that there's two properties here that might, be in the crosshairs of this company for them to do the due diligence. Now, we don't know, the company hasn't laid out to us exactly which ones per se. We do know which ones are not under duress. And so we do know which ones, we can say are doing fine. We have a pretty good relationship with the hoteliers in the city,
Mhm.
and none of the branded hotels, the ones that are under a flag of a national brand, whether it's
Right.
Marriott, IHG, and their sub brands like Residence Inn, Homewood Suites, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
None of those are the ones that are at a point where they want to consider selling to this company. We do have a few that generally tend to be on the south side of the city that are no
Mhm.
longer branded.
Mhm.
And, so we suspect that it may be one of those. Now, again, so one last thing is to consider is on the ordinance, we knew this was coming. So there's been, as we keep up with trends out there, we started to see that, yes, there are hotels that start going through a cycle when they are not performing well.
Right.
And there were some companies that were maybe wanting to convert. And so council, so what I did is I presented them an ordinance and I said, here's the deal. This phenomenon is coming, or it is here. It could certainly be here very soon. And we probably should put some thought behind what we want to do if a company comes to us and says, hey, we want to take this hotel, buy it, and convert it into an apartment. How would you regulate that? Do you allow it? And so council considered this versus saying, no, we don't want to have anything. And their ultimately, the ultimate stance that a majority of them took is with the regulations, with restrictions on how it would be developed
Mhm.
and how much capacity it could have, how many bedrooms it could have, things like that.
Right.
They preferred to, with a high standard at least, have this in place so that if somebody wants to do it, they can do it. There's a mechanism for them to do it
Mhm.
versus us just categorically say no. And then the hotel owner does one of two things. He or she continues to drop the room rates until they can fill enough rooms to make some money, and that usually doesn't end well.
No, it
Or
doesn't.
they turn it into really, really long-term, which almost acts like an apartment
An
anyway.
apartment, right? Yeah.
Or the worst is they just shutter the doors.
Yeah.
And, so the council was like, look, we don't like those options. We think the alternative is to spend some time, come up with a well thought out ordinance. If a company comes to us and wants to do it, we have a mechanism for them to do it, but they have a very narrow band to do it. We don't say, oh yeah, sure, whatever. We look forward to your product and cross our fingers. It's highly regulated on how it transitions from hotel to apartment, but we feel like that would be a better product than the alternative. Now, mind you, our first, our first option or our preferred option is for the hotels to start performing great and for them to be operating the way that they originally went in. That is certainly our preferred method. But if a gun is held to our head and it's, do this, or it's going to shutter their doors and become a vacant property, or one that just allows almost anybody in, or rents by the hour, as the case may be, those kind of things, we don't want that versus a well-regulated conversion into apartments.
I think this is what a good city does, right? Like you said, you find trends that are happening across cities, competitive landscape, right? And you come ahead of that curve before waiting to see what happens. I mean, a city has to be able to be proactive in a lot of what they do, not just in the economic sphere of encouraging new business coming in, but to look at redevelopment, to look at all that. So I think you guys did a good job in coming up with that and being able to address it and maybe not deny it, because denying it or saying, no, we can't, Sandy Springs, for example, I think was entertaining the same thing. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. Well, that just doesn't look at the reality of life and what can happen if you don't allow some options there, right? So having some options and actually control over your own destiny is always a good thing. So I appreciate the city looking at that. Same way, I mean, you guys have done the redevelopment authority. I'm sure there'll be more stuff coming out of that soon. And addressing things like, for example, just recently they don't recall the name of the company, but it was like a $45 million purchase of Corner Center, I think it was, which is an apartment complex on Holcomb Ridge Road, I think, or Peachtree Corner Circle, right? So they just purchased that, and these things are going to happen. Economic purchases, REITs are going to come in, real estate investment groups like PEG is a real estate investment holding company. They're not, they go in and they buy stuff cheap or wherever they can negotiate, and then build something out that can give them a cash flow. I mean, that's what they're in business for.
That's what they do, right?
Yeah. So and there are companies out there that actually do that with, I think it was American Federation. They go out and buy residential property, homes, and bid up that and buy that and then rent them out, sublease them. I mean, so that's going on, certainly going on in this market, I bet too. And it's hard to find a house that there was one article that I forget which paper put out that there's too many real estate agents now and not enough homes to list. So got that going on. Let's talk a little bit about the charter amendment that just happened this past city council meeting. Originally, I thought it was a great idea to do what we discussed in our last podcast, to give the city not more time, but to give the city sort of emergency powers, if you will, to be able to address something on a quicker basis than otherwise is being handled. But obviously that got a lot of protests against it. People didn't like that idea. So tell us what happened Tuesday night with this amendment, because it didn't pass, or at least a portion of it didn't pass.
That's correct. So in the course of other activity, we will sometimes review documents, and we needed to review the charter. Something came up when we were looking at it one day, and we uncovered essentially a Scrivener's error, a typo. And so we were like, we need to look at it. We looked at it and found two more. And so I'd been sitting on it for a while, and it was just I had an agenda that I thought was just let's just get this out of the way. So we put it on there. But in the course of that, charter amendments are a very formal event, as it should be. The charter is the city's constitution, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be a process that's well thought out. And so when you have when you crack that thing open, sometimes it's a good time to make other changes while you're there. I mean, it's almost like the medical community. You're going to crack somebody's chest open and get in there, do something. Why not
Right.
fix something else that's been nagging them or whatever? So one of the things that even when I got here, having managed other cities, I found unique, and that is a requirement that there be two separate reads at two separate meetings. And that in and of itself was not odd. One of the other two cities I managed had that mechanism. That was the normal course. But there was also a mechanism that if a majority, in the case of the other city, it was just a majority. Here, the proposal was unanimous consent.
Right.
If there was consent to waive that requirement, you could in fact have that second read and the vote at the same meeting. And it existed for instances that were emergent, but not necessarily emergent for the entire city. Like you got to drop what you're doing and do it. I mean, you could argue that the mask ordinance requiring the wearing of masks during a pandemic was a citywide emergent situation, and it needed to be moved in fast. And we have a mechanism in the charter now allowing for emergency ordinances,
Mm-hmm.
but it only is in place for 30 days and has a very high standard. There's got to be a risk to life, limb, property type of thing. And if that's not the case, then it doesn't meet that standard. So there are instances where it doesn't quite meet that standard, but yet it is kind of exigent circumstances and an emergent situation. So I just thought, hey, why not put a mechanism in there on the off chance that those situations happen that you at least could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we made it to where it was a unanimous consent of all council members. It wasn't even just the ones that are present. Literally all 7 of them would have had to, at the meeting where the first reading took place, would have had to have said, yes, Mr. City Manager, what you just presented, and you're asking us to waive that 2 meeting requirement. This situation does in fact warrant us doing it at this meeting, and all of us are going to actually be forced to raise our hand and vote yes that it is emergent. I've seen that a lot of places, and let's remember, a lot of cities don't even have a 2-read requirement.
Right, that's not the norm.
Yeah, there's a lot of cities that you have the reading and the public hearing and the vote at the same council meeting. And the argument there is people track this thing one time, it's going to be at one meeting unless there's a formal vote to table, in which case you'll already be at that meeting to hear about that. We don't need to read every time. And so that's probably more common than the other, but for cities that do have the 2-read, there's oftentimes, again, that mechanism to do it. So I submitted it, and there were a lot of people who were opposed to it, and they showed up and spoke,
Right.
and council said, you know what, maybe now is not the right time, or in some cases, maybe they don't ever want to do it. I mean, look, it was good to see people, watching things. Sometimes you wonder how many people are even civically active and knowledgeable about what's going on. That was good too. It was great to see a forum for people to show up and express their opinions. There still is some confusion about what was being asked. That was the disappointing part about, lack of transparency. And it's, you're kind of like, we could still have a special called meeting right now under our current charter. If I needed something done fast, I could actually call for a special call meeting tomorrow night. And if council, if the mayor himself or a majority of council wanted to have it, agreed that we need to have it, we could have a special call meeting. You could argue that that's less transparent than doing it always at a council meeting, because everybody can put those council meetings in their calendar. I mean, it's always going to be at the same time of the month, but special call meetings they may miss. And so somebody could have missed that and say, well, you did this, I'm not tracking a city council meeting on a Friday night, or I'm not. And that was the argument some people were making is, oh, you could already do a special call meeting. Well, we can. And I guess if it ever comes to that, we will. But
because what's the notification time for a special meeting?
I mean, it's 24 hours.
Okay. So versus it being on the agenda, and everyone knows the city council meeting is the fourth Tuesday of the month, and that it wouldn't just, it just doesn't show up 24 hours ahead on the agenda.
Correct. It's also live streamed and recorded and posted on the website.
So the fact that you had unanimous vote to be able to even consider the subject, I thought was awesome, because you want unanimous.
Just one council member, like you said, this isn't emergent enough for me, and I vote no, and then that's it. I mean, literally all 7 had to.
Because otherwise.
Oh, go ahead.
No, because otherwise what happens is, let's say it's an ordinance and the city council votes on it, and it's, whatever, 4-3 or something. It could be that, right, on the second thing, but on the second read. But on the first read, and if you wanted to move to a vote, that unanimous part is important, right? All the council people have to vote on allowing a vote, and then you would think that all of them would
still have the public hearing, and you still have to vote on the agenda item.
Yes. So I'm disappointed a little bit in that some people actually don't know what it was about, but they came out, and they found out. I think the same people found out at the meeting because it was explained, but sometimes people still don't quite get it. And, there's an opinion on everything. Maybe maybe that's a good thing that for now, it's not allowed. We'll find out in the future if that was a bad choice, at some point.
Rico, so interesting that you bring that up, because we technically could have even had a real world example. Would it have been determined to be emergent? But some of the people were asking, well, when do you ever feel the need to move quickly, but it doesn't apply to citywide stuff? Well, we just had an issue this last weekend where an individual rented out through Airbnb his pool. So the rental mentioned that it was the rental of a pool, not the rental of a dwelling, as our code has. And we do not allow for rentals less than 30 days, or actually less than 31 days. It has to be 31 days or more. And so you can't do an Airbnb for anything less than, 31 days or more. Okay. But it says to rent out a dwelling. And so an individual rented out a pool and ended up there was probably approaching 50 people. You're not supposed to even have 16 on any, more than 16 through Airbnb anyway. Upwards of 50 people that showed up. And the police were called, and technically speaking, with the pool thing, the argument was we're not violating your ordinance because it's not a dwelling, and you just get into this. So my point to that is we are going to do a text amendment of our code and amend that to ensure that it's the dwelling and any other, amenities outside of that.
Right.
But that could have been considered for the neighborhood. Like if you live next to this house, you would consider this an emergent situation. You would be like, look,
for sure,
this is a good example of change that code quickly so that I can go ahead and feel comfortable that they can't run through this loophole. And instead we'll introduce it. It'll be 60 plus days before it's voted on. And again, that's fine. if the residents want that, enough of them. And that's why council, it was good to see people got to say their opinion, and council listened. And there was certainly more people that showed up and sent emails that were against it than for it, although that's usually the case. But that's fine. I mean, that's how democracy works. That's how the city works. Council was responsive, and we're going to drive on and move on, and that's it. But yeah, so the only disappointing part is that there are still some people who truly still don't understand what this was and what it's about, and how the protective measures that were in place were, you could argue, even more restricted than the current one. And I just hate people making decisions based on false information or a misunderstanding. But
misinformation versus disinformation, I guess.
Right.
They just don't. They're not. And everyone has an opinion too, obviously. So the fact, like you said, I mean, it always happens that the no's are always the ones showing up versus the yes. The people that don't have a problem with it are not showing up saying, "Yay, good job! This is exactly what we want." It's usually the no's that show up and say, "Why is government doing this? I want them off my back. I'm a libertarian. I'm a conservative. These are things you shouldn't be doing as a government. Oh, by the way, the city probably shouldn't exist." I mean, to some degree, and they have the right to say that, and they can, there's a belief there of that, and that's fine. But that shouldn't drive the evolution of a city as it evolves into doing good stuff. That has to be taken into account every time, to the detriment of other people possibly. So, like you said, I'm sure if I lived next door to that, I'd be like, yes, I would definitely want you to change that, because the police could probably say, well, we could do disturbance of the peace. There's too many people there. But what stops it from happening again legally, you know?
And again, we're going to change it. So it's not like we're not. It didn't prevent us from doing it. But, look, again, that's how it's done. And it was great. It's clearly the greatest number is what council heard that night, and they or that was presented that night. They heard it and they said, you know what, now's not the time. Maybe it's not ever. I don't know, but as a resident of the city, I'm glad to see my city council, to sit there and listen and say, look, we'll reserve judgment till the bitter end, and they did. And so I'm glad to see that as a resident. I mean, sometimes it can be frustrating as an employee of the city, but as a resident, I'm glad council does it that way. So
and it's always good people show up. I mean, I like that. I prefer at least an active citizenry, because it does make things better, because you have to make sure that you do things a certain way, right? Dot the I's, cross the T's, and stuff. So, I mean, that's not a bad thing necessarily.
No, it is.
Right. Last thing I want to talk about is something exciting too. I mean, obviously hotels are opening up. We had a jobs fair this past weekend for the hospitality industry here in Peachtree Corners, because I remember at one point, as the Hilton was opening up, they could only open up certain floors because they didn't have enough employees to clean all the floors, for example. Getting people back to work is a little difficult I don't want to say post-COVID, but emerging and opening up for business, it's a little tough for the hospitality industry to be able to get the work they need. So I'm glad they're able to do that. And because of that, we're able to bring in conferences and other things. So I'm excited to hear that the V2X live conference is coming to Peachtree Corners. I mean, you guys were involved 2 years ago in the Smart City Expo that came in to Atlanta, and that and the city had a good representation there, and people from that international national expo come out to the city. So now we have this V2X live, because as most people may not realize, cars are becoming the most connected device in the world at this point, and electric cars are moving towards being the norm by 2050, 2035, and even sooner. I mean, a lot of these companies are coming out, Volkswagen, Ford, are all coming out saying they're going to be like almost all electric at some point. So that you can't have self-driving cars without electric cars, right? I mean, they go hand in hand. So tell us a little bit about the V2X Live that's going to be coming in October. That's going to be, I think that's through a partnership or because of Curiosity Lab and stuff. So tell us what's going on with that, Brian.
All right. So as conferences go, conferences have a theme, if you will, a reason to hold it. And a lot of times conferences, new conference themes are spin-offs of emerging technology from conferences they used to be a subset of.
Right.
So you could have had a automotive conference, and back in the day, you at some point had this subset where they were talking about cars being able to talk to something else, and people are like, wow, and so over time, connected vehicles and all that comes with it. You've got the vehicle itself and a whole part of that. What is it going to say? Who's doing it? Then you've got who's listening, because you've got vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to vehicle, and you have vehicle to all sorts of stuff. And so all of those have their own subset. And then you have the software that you've got to do all this. You have this large, ever-growing industry around connected vehicles, and it has merged off in one of the companies that does a lot of different conferences decided to be the first to create this conference on its own. And so it went through a due diligence period and said, we're going to create this brand new conference. We're going to be the first one to do a connected vehicle conference called V2X Live. Vehicle to Everything Live is what V2X stands for. And they did a due diligence, and they wanted to pick 3 locations in the world to start this series. One in Europe. They chose Frankfurt, Germany. And they wanted to do 2 in the States, one in the East Coast and one in the West Coast. They picked a city, I believe is Santa Clara, but a city in Silicon Valley on the West Coast. Right. And because of Curiosity Lab, Peachtree Corners was picked on the East Coast. Now, mind you, when I say Peachtree Corners, as opposed to Smart City Atlanta, that is held in the Georgia World Congress Center, this conference will actually be held in Peachtree Corners. And so the conference will be a little bit different in that it's not one conference with everything under one roof. This is a little bit more of, call it an experiential one. And of course, the reason is we actually have a vehicle to everything environment. I mean, we have created that city street where a vehicle that is capable of doing this could drive up our track and be talking to every light pole, every other vehicle, every pedestrian who has a phone, every traffic signal, every pedestrian crossing, all the way up. We have that environment now. Right. And they want to do a conference where you can actually talk about connected vehicle and get out and in some cases see them in action, like literally be standing under a light pole that has the technology to talk to the car, and have the companies that provide that be there and have a tent set up. And so it's going to basically be a linear conference in that the conference host hotel will be the Hilton. And there will be a significant presence, though, call it a host hotel A and B. A would be the Hilton, B will be the Marriott, our 2 conference hotels here. Right. And then there will be a lot of meeting space there. Of course, the rooms for the conference attendees, and then breakout sessions and and demonstrations will be up the track. So as you go essentially north up the track, there will be some breakout and panel discussions held at City Hall. And then there'll be locations up the track where you may have Wattway, who does the solar roadway, have a tent, and people can go out there and see our solar roadway. And then we'll have more at the Innovation Center where you'll have breakouts. And then there'll be even more so up at Atlanta Tech Park at the other end. And so we're looking to do this conference. The cool thing about it is its ability to pump activity into our local economy. So now you're talking they are projecting maybe about 1,000 conference attendees in year one, because it is a new conference. And so
Right.
that's a lot of hotel rooms, and maybe it'll be more, I don't know, but that's a lot of hotel rooms that'll be filled. So that, for 2 nights at least. And then
Mhm.
it could even be more people during the day if Metro Atlanta, people who live in Metro Atlanta show up. And then
Right. Right.
what we're looking to maybe do is, instead of having the keynote address at the beginning of the day, which is oftentimes what you see on a conference, is we do it at the end of the day. We get everybody to go up and we hold that keynote address up at the town green using the stage, so that when you're done with it, you're already at our entertainment district and you can already eat right there. And maybe we have a concert afterwards. And so we're looking to pump more activity into the forum in the town, center.
Yeah.
And, we'll have a bunch of pretty cool demonstrations there. We'll have a bunch of autonomous vehicles for it and all sorts of
Town
other
center. Yeah,
demolitions.
that would be cool. People get a chance to take a look at those autonomous vehicles, maybe tented areas with other interactive such things going on. That would be a great experience, I think, for local residents also. Besides bringing in, like you said,
Right.
possibly 1,000 people, economically impacting hotels and restaurants and all that.
But, it's just an example again where, our residents have been very supportive of Curiosity Lab because we have
Hmm.
told them of its ability to do these kind of things.
Yeah.
And it continues to, outperform expectations, and its presence and what we've done with it and the activity that it has generated and putting us on the map got these
Yeah.
conference organizers to reach out to us, and we told them what it was about. Then they sent a delegation and they looked at it. We talked through the details and they said, you know what? We'd like to do it there. We think that would be a really unique conference. And so Curiosity Lab continues to deliver in its ability to generate activity for the city.
Yeah. Exciting because activity begets activity.
It does.
Companies, organizations will see this V2X Live conference be looking at the city in a different light because of that conference. So we may end up seeing much more coming out of this than just that conference, certainly.
I hope so. So yeah,
yeah,
it's exciting. It'll be in the middle of October. There'll be an announcement coming out next week, a formal announcement. Website for it is almost done. So yeah, it's some exciting stuff.
excellent. So much stuff going on in this city, things that keeps us busy, gets this podcast going every month, and being able to, and we haven't even covered everything really. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we could have covered. Um, but these are the top things. Hope everyone enjoyed this show. If you have any questions, post them down in the comments. I'll see about getting those answered if I don't have the answers for them. Check out, again, the concert this weekend. There might be some tickets left for On the Border, a tribute band. And check out the rest of the summer schedule. And keep an eye out because there's a lot more new businesses opening up in Peachtree Corners. Just 5 or 6 in the last retail businesses in the last month or two. Recently opened here in the Forum Town Center and on, I believe, Jimmy Carter. So check it out, Brian. I appreciate you being with me.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having me.
again. It's always good to have you and always great to get the right answers and good answers and solid answers. Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. Look out for our next issue. We're working on it. That'll be out in first week of August. And just hold some of these dates. There's the Peachtree Corners Festival, which is happening in September, I believe. And so that's happening at Town Center for the first time. So that's going to be working out there. And then Light Up the Corners, I believe that's happening in August. So check that out, and we'll be back to you with more information. Thanks, everyone.